All right, giant sigh while you've been having fun and listening to other teachers teach you amazing things. I've been trying to get my microphone and this goofy McDonald's looking headset thing to work because a button was pushed that I didn't know was pushed, and I might as well have built another chair for how successful I was. All right, enough about me. Let's talk about the powers of Congress. Some of the stuff that you guys read about in the Article 1 scavenger hunt is confusing. And I get that because it was written in 1787. So what I want to do is help clear up some of this stuff. I want us to understand what Congress can and can't do and the different powers unique to the House of Representatives and the Senate. We start off with what Congress can do. They can pass tax laws. It's allowed for them to raise revenue, again, as money coming in. They can regulate trade. In other words, they're allowed to set rules that govern trade between states, between the United States and other countries. Regulate is just a synonym for making rules. They can defend the nation, whether that's through establishing a militia like the National Guard, or declaring war, or creating the Army, Navy, and all those other branches and other aspects of our military that we deem necessary. They can enforce its laws. They don't do this directly. Enforcing laws directly is what we talk about when we think of the police. What we mean is they can establish courts to hear trials brought before them. Congress can provide for growth, whether it's through policies, initiatives, through laws that benefit certain things, whether we're talking about economic growth or geographic growth. Congress can also do anything it deems necessary and proper. And this is the elastic clause. Think about a rubber band, how it stretches. What we're talking about here is the idea that we can stretch the powers of Congress if we need. And this is a scary thing in the sense that they can deal with just about any problem they want as long as they don't violate some basic things. And this gives Congress the majority of the powers. This was a very wise thing, though, when the founders created it, because they understood that they weren't going to know everything Congress needed to do. So what can't Congress do? They cannot pass an ex post facto laws. And here's our introduction to Latin. Be prepared as we go forward, especially in the legal units, to deal with a lot of Latin terminology. Really what an ex post facto law does is it says once Congress passes a law, people have to follow it from that day forward. Congress cannot make things you do yesterday illegal today. Meaning, yesterday I'm driving 45 miles an hour on the road, and the speed limit is 45 miles an hour. Today, Congress passes a law that says that same road is 35 miles an hour. They cannot give me a ticket for what I did yesterday because I was in compliance with the law yesterday. They cannot pass a bill of attainder. And these are things that the Founding Fathers were worried about because of political dissent. In other words, if people are speaking against the government, we want them to be able to. So we don't want somebody to be arrested and held in jail for an unlimited amount of time. In order to keep somebody in jail, we have to have a trial, at least after a certain period. There are limits on how long we can hold people in jail without being formally charged or without having a trial. Stupid thing. Ignore that. They cannot suspend the writ of habeas corpus. In other words, you have to produce a reason why somebody is going to court. You cannot just bring them to court without evidence. Again, this is to prevent politicians and political leaders, especially when we're thinking about Europe, from holding people that could rile up dissent against them for no reason other than they're going to create dissent. We want to protect people's freedom of speech, especially their freedom of speech against the government. They cannot tax exports. So if you're going to sell something to another country, they cannot tax you for it. They cannot pass any law violating the Bill of Rights. Again, this is where those last two really deal with that freedom of speech and the right to assemble. They cannot favor one state over another. They cannot pass laws that make it easier for Wisconsin to be successful. They cannot do things that allow Wisconsin to do well at the expense of Minnesota. And they cannot grant titles of nobility. This sounds silly today because we're talking about making somebody a king. We can't imagine them making somebody a king today. But you have to remember when they wrote these things, when they built the Constitution in 1787, they were all people who had grown up and developed under a monarchy. So they were worried about creation of another one. And lastly, they cannot withdraw money without a law. If our government is going to spend any money, they have to have a law. And this is why it's so important to understand that, yes, the president creates a budget, but he can't spend any money without Congress, which leads us right to the House of Representatives. These are the people who are most directly connected to their constituents. In other words, us, the people they represent, because they're elected every 2 years. Their special powers start with impeachment proceedings. If we're going to remove somebody from office, like the president, the House of Representatives are the ones who vote on starting this process. So you have to get a majority of the House of Representatives to agree that somebody should be removed. Second, they start all appropriation bills. No money gets spent without the House of Representatives' approval. There is no way to get around it because they have to start the bill. They determine the president if no candidate receives a majority of the electoral vote. We have an even split potential of 268. If we get 268 to 268, it goes to the House of Representatives, and they will then vote. Each member will vote, and that'll determine the presidency. This is really what the Founding Fathers expected to happen, is that no candidate, or seldom would candidates, get a majority of electoral votes. That way, it would go to the House of Representatives, and these people who knew government best and knew the political, knew the right leaders, and knew the national people best, they would decide. Lastly, the Senate. What do they have that's unique? Number one, they are the judge and jury on impeachment trials. They're the one who decide if we're going to remove somebody from office. They approve treaties with foreign nations. The president can make an executive agreements, but those aren't nearly as powerful. If we're going to talk about major treaties, whether they are ending a war or huge economic treaties, the Senate has the right to approve them or to get rid of them. They also approve any presidential appointments that are to major positions like the cabinet, certain ambassadorships, and the Joint Chiefs of Staff, as well as the most important ones, the Supreme Court justices. The Senate gets to approve or disapprove. All right, we'll see you Monday. Have a good weekend.